All right, everybody, in this video, what we're going to talk about is how we can make logical conclusions deductively using what's called the law of syllogism. So in the previous video, you watched a video about making conclusions using the law of detachment. In this particular video, we're talking about how to make conclusions using the law of syllogism. And so as we take a look at my law of syllogism, it works like this. So if I have this conditional with the hypothesis P, if P then Q, and then I have a secondary conditional, which is if Q then R. Now notice that the conclusion Q of the first conditional is now the hypothesis of the second conditional. Well, if that happens, I can make this logical conclusion. If I start with my original hypothesis, then I can conclude the conditional of the final statement. And you'll see what this means in just a second. But just remember, whatever additional piece of information that you have, it has to logically set up identically to your hypothesis P for you to follow these steps to logically make a conclusion. And I'm hoping you'll understand when you see a couple of examples here. I call this cutting out the middle part. And so if you can find an identical statement there in the middle part, meaning the conclusion of the first statement identically matches the hypothesis of the second statement, you can just cut out the middle part, and what you're left with is now your hypothesis and your conclusion of your new statement. So let's take a look at how this works. Consider this statement. The conditional number one is, if it is the first Tuesday of the month, then I go to Walmart. If I go to the Walmart, then I will buy a t-shirt. So when I take a look at my statements, my original hypothesis of conditional number one is, it is the first Tuesday of the month. My original conclusion of conditional one is, I go to the Walmart. Now, as you take a look at the second conditional, if I go to the Walmart is logically and almost just identical to the conclusion of my first statement. So I'm just going to put a Q there, okay? And then my final conclusion is I will buy a t-shirt. So what I'm asking you to do here is see if you can look at these two logical statements and then make a conditional out of them or draw a logical conclusion from these statements. And so as I get started, I think it's helpful if we set up our diagram. The final statement I've given you here is, it is the first Tuesday of the month. And I have to logically figure out, does that statement fit in with either P, Q, or R? Which statement is that logically identical to, if it's logically identical to any of them? The only way I can make a conclusion here is if it's logically identical to statement P. If it's not logically identical to statement P, then I can't make any conclusion whatsoever. So let's take a look here. So I think what's useful is if we make our little diagram. So in my inner circle, we're gonna have three circles here. In my innermost circle, I'm gonna put Tuesday because I can't fit all the words in the little circle, but that's just corresponds to my statement P there, if it's the first Tuesday of the month. My second statement, or my next circle out, is my statement Q. That's about going to Walmart. And then my final statement is I will buy a t-shirt. Now, before we go any further, this is the way I set up, and this is the format of if P then Q, if Q then R, right? So it logically lines up with those symbols that I gave you there at the beginning of this particular video. And so before I go any further, we can cut out the middleman, right? We know that my statement P logically lines up with, is logically identical. It's the first Tuesday of the month. That's logically identical to the hypothesis of the original conditional. So what that allows me to do is I can cut out these two statements right here, okay? So the conclusion that I can make, if it is the first Tuesday of the month, then I will buy a t-shirt. That's the conclusion that I can make. And I can make this conclusion because my third statement there, that given P, was logically identical to the hypothesis. And I could join those two statements together logically. And that's why I was able to eliminate the parts about going to the Walmart. I eliminated that middle part. And since I was able to eliminate that middle part, then the hypothesis of my original statement is my hypothesis, and the conclusion of my second statement is my conclusion. So since I know that it's the first Tuesday of the month, then I know that I will buy a t-shirt. That's my conclusion there. Let's take another look at another example so that you can see how this little pattern works. All right, if you go outside in August, then you will sweat a lot. Conditional 2 says if you sweat a lot, then you will need to drink water. And then you have this third statement that we have to figure out where that third statement fits in. You practice band outside in August. So we have to figure out where that statement fits within those three statements that I've given you. So let's take a look here. I know that my original hypothesis of my first conditional is that I go outside in August. I know that I sweat a lot is the conclusion of my first statement. But I also know that if I sweat a lot or I'm sweating a lot, that's my hypothesis of my second statement. And then my conclusion of my second statement is you will need to drink water. And what I have to figure out is practicing band outside in August, where does that fit into P, Q, and R? And so to see where that's going to fit in P, Q, and R for Mr. Rachel, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but this visual helps me see what I need to see. I'm going to set up my little diagram. I know that my hypothesis of my original conditional, which is my innermost circle, is practicing band outside in August. That's my statement P. I know that sweating a lot is basically the middle part, because the middle part is the conclusion of the first part, but the hypothesis of the second part. So that's my statement Q. And then my statement R is I need to drink water. And so I have to figure out, well, where does me practicing band outside fit in this little diagram? If it hits the bullseye, then I know that I can make the conclusion that's the final conclusion about needing to drink water. So I'm practicing band outside in August. Before I go any further, let's go ahead and cut out our middle part. So wherever me practicing band outside in August, if that fits in that bullseye right there, that tells me I can make that logical conclusion. And when I'm talking about hitting the bullseye, I'm saying when you're matching that statement, you practice band outside in August, does that logically match you go outside in August? And in this case, it does. And so for this reason, if I go outside in August, if I'm practicing band outside in August, what can I logically conclude? Well, I can logically conclude. So anyway, as we address the question about what we can logically conclude, we can logically conclude that we will need to drink water, or if you're practicing band outside in August, you will need to drink water. And the reason that I can logically conclude that is as I take a look at conditional 1 and conditional 2, the conclusion of conditional 1 is the hypothesis of conditional 2. So that's why I just cut out the part about sweating a lot, and now my conclusion that I can do is I know that I'm identically and I'm logically matching that I'm going outside in August with the statement you practice band outside in August. So then logically I can make that conclusion of you will need to drink water. So in this video, we covered the law of syllogism and how we logically draw conclusions using the law of syllogism when we have a given set of facts.